Hi, I'm Sharon Reich Garson in New Jersey. It's Sunday, January 4th. Today, Venezuela's Nicolas Maduro is in custody in New York after the U.S. raid on Caracas. Donald Trump says the U.S. will run Venezuela, while the woman left in charge in Caracas says Venezuela will resist. This is Reuters World News, bringing you everything you need to know from the front lines in 10 minutes, 7 days a week. Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro, with hands tied, being escorted by guards at the headquarters of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration in New York. The footage, verified by Reuters, was shared by U.S. President Donald Trump's administration on its Rapid Response 47 account on X. This was just hours after Maduro and his wife were seized in a dramatic operation by the U.S. military in Venezuela. Images released by U.S. authorities show him handcuffed and blindfolded during the flight to the U.S. Under heavy guard and with helicopters flying overhead, Maduro was then taken to a detention center, where he has been indicted on various federal charges. That includes narco-terrorism and conspiracy, and he's expected in Manhattan federal court on Monday, according to a Justice Department official. While many Western allies oppose Maduro and say he stole Venezuela's 2024 election, there were numerous calls for the U.S. to respect international law and resolve the crisis diplomatically. Donald Trump says there needs to be a safe transition of power.
We're going to run the country until such time as we can do a safe, proper, and judicious transition. So we don't want to be involved with having somebody else get in, and we have the same situation that we had for the last long period of years.
In Venezuela, the streets have been mostly calm. Julia Sims-Cobb is Reuters' Andean bureau chief.
Happily, after the initial U.S. attack, things seem to have been very peaceful. There have been some pro-government marches in Caracas, but they've been mostly small groups. Otherwise, a lot of people have stayed home, but there haven't been reports of street violence. In some places, we have seen lines at gas stations and grocery stores where people are trying to stock up on the basics. There's a lot of businesses that chose not to open today, but in general, it's been quite peaceful, barring that initial U.S. blitz in the early hours of Saturday morning.
What happens next in Venezuela is for now unclear. In his address, President Trump said Venezuela's Vice President, Delcy Rodriguez, spoke with Secretary of State Marco Rubio and was cooperative.
She had a long conversation with Marco, and she said, we'll do whatever you need. I think she was quite gracious, but she really doesn't have a choice. We're going to have this done right.
But as Julia explains, when Delcy Rodriguez gave a televised address later,
por herencia, tenemos el deber sagrado de resguardar como es nuestra independencia nacional.
She had an entirely different message.
Delcy Rodriguez appeared on Venezuelan state television with a bunch of other bigwigs from the Venezuelan government, including Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello and Rodriguez's brother, Jorge, who's the head of the National Assembly legislature. And they presented this sort of collective front. And she said that the only president of Venezuela is Nicolas Maduro, and that they were having a Security Council, and that they were determined for Maduro to be released, and that they believed this U.S. action on Saturday morning was an effort to claim Venezuela's natural resources, including oil. So it's obviously a complete contradiction in terms of what's going on. And the other fascinating element of this contradiction is the role of the Venezuelan opposition. So Maria Corina Machado is the very famous leader of the Venezuelan opposition. She just won the Nobel Peace Prize last month. And Trump sort of poo-pooed her involvement in this process and said that she didn't have the respect of the Venezuelan people and so couldn't be part of a transition.
She's a very nice woman, but she doesn't have the respect to be
Machado herself says the opposition is ready.
Yes, Machado put out a very optimistic sounding statement in the middle of the day on Saturday, basically encouraging Venezuelans to sit tight and be ready for change, and that she was confident that the opposition would be able to take their rightful place in power because they say that they won that 2024 election. They're backed up on that by the U.S. and by international observers, that they will be able to take that place and rebuild a country that would be prosperous for everyone.
So Donald Trump says the U.S. is going to run Venezuela until there can be a, quote, safe, judicious transition. And he says he's open to sending U.S. forces into Venezuela.
We had boots on the ground last night at a very high level, actually. We're not afraid of it. We don't mind saying it.
So what does that actually mean? And where does this intervention leave a president who's consistently touted an America First agenda? We spoke to foreign policy editor Don Durfee.
So he was asked during his press conference, right, what happens next? And he says, we will run the country. And he said that, several times. And he was asked who was going to run the country. And he turned back and pointed and said, these gentlemen behind me. So he was indicating the Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. So that seems to imply that it's going to be some sort of a U.S. military-led government. But at the same time, he has indicated that some members of the current Venezuela government will remain in power. So it's really unclear how this is all going to pan out.
And Don says this could be a risky move for the Trump administration.
Reuters did a poll a few weeks back asking, how many people would support U.S. military action to remove Maduro, and it was only 1 in 5 voters would support that. So, just on the face of it, it seems like an unpopular move among the public. So, yes, it could translate into a political risk for Trump and his party.
Don, what's the potential geopolitical fallout?
Right. So this is definitely going to have pretty major global ripples. The U.S. wasn't technically at war with Venezuela, and sort of the justifications that have been provided to the international community for this action, I would say are not the most robust. The U.S., of course, has been very critical of countries like Russia in particular for its action in Ukraine. China also, which has been eyeing Taiwan. You could easily imagine a situation where either one of those countries or another country use the U.S. action now as, or sort of point to the U.S. action as justification for the kinds of steps that they might want to take against their own neighbors. Unclear if that will happen, but it is an unsettling thing for many around the world.
While Donald Trump has said Nicolas Maduro had to be removed because of drugs and terrorism, oil is also clearly on the U.S. agenda. Venezuela sits on the world's largest oil reserve. Reuters commodities and energy editor Simon Webb says it'll still take some time before a difference is seen in the oil market.
There's been very little in the way of exports from Venezuela since Trump declared an effective oil embargo on Venezuela in December. So since then, the only exports that have been coming out of the country have been less than 100,000 barrels per day from Chevron, the US company which has a license to export. So in the short term, not much change. Trump said that he would keep the oil embargo in effect for now.
Longer term, there's a potential to produce a lot more oil, but Simon says that could take years.
If you look at what happened in Iraq, if you look at what happened in Libya after the wars there, neither of those countries have yet reached the potential they could have been at if all had been in order and investment had been going in. There's no reason to think that Venezuela would be any different. It's just a long, long way from that and many, many hundreds of billions of dollars short of investment in order to get to that kind of level.
To keep up to date with all the latest from Venezuela and other stories from around the world, head to Reuters.com or the Reuters app. Don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast player. And if you're listening on a smart speaker, just ask for the latest news from Reuters 7 days a week. We'll be back tomorrow with our daily headline show.